wow, it's pretty smooth to play. This is a Bogner Überschall. This is a very early one. It's serial 86. And what we're going to do today is I'm going to take you through the work that I performed on this. It's a US model. It was 120 volts, right? The power transformer on this is not able to be wired, or was not able to be wired to 240 volts. So Mark, who is a local player here in Melbourne, Australia, who I've worked on a bunch of amps for Mark, bought this to me with a Mercury Magnetics replacement PT to install in this amp. And replacing power transformers in 100 watters like this, it's not for the faint-hearted. As you will find out in this video, it comes with a bit of a language warning because I had some fun with this thing. Alright, so I've got Variac dialed in at 117, just a shade under 120 volts. And this amp is connected, under the bench here I've got a Sir PT15 Turbo 12 cab, right? So it's connected to that. Let's bring this guy out of standby and let's see what we've got. A green light. Okay, Bogner's channel switching on the back. Nice lights. This will be the clean. There's obviously the gain channel over here. Interestingly, both have their independent presence channel, which is often a feature of these Bogners. Bring it out of standby. It's quite a loud hum at idle. I mean, I've certainly heard worse, but that is reasonably loud, that hum. I'm not sure whether it's coming through on the camera, and that's with the master volume down, right? So bring the master up, you can hear a bit of gain hiss there. Very, very minor though. That hum is actually, it sounds like, you know, 50 cycle, 60 cycle hum, maybe. So I'll definitely check that out. I'm not too sure, maybe it could be the power tubes. We'll have to have a look at that, but let's see if we can get a noise out of this thing. Alright, so I've just got my EVH Stripe series. It's a guitar I keep in the workshop here because, look, these things aren't that expensive, so it's a good guitar to have in here to knock around with. But okay, that's the clean channel. Let's move over to this gain channel. Let's have a look. Ooh. Don't know if you can hear that, bit of a ring when you change channels there. Alright, there's the Bogner gain. Alright, well, it works. That's not a bad sounding lead channel, that. Really quite nice under the fingers almost straight away. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take the chassis out of the head cam. I'm going to measure a bunch of voltages, right? So before I start to pull out the existing power transformer, I want to actually measure the B+ line, I'll measure anything else in terms of, there might be probably a secondary wind on this PT for perhaps DC heaters or for the relay supply. I just want to check all those voltages at 117 or 120 wall, so that when we put the new power transformer in at 240 mains, I want to make sure that the voltages on the secondary side of the PT are the same as what the stock PT measures. Let's do that now. Alright, we've got this bad boy out of the head cap. First thing I've noticed is this power transformer. It's Pacific Transformers, right? I suspect this is not original. I could be wrong. But I'm going to have a look at this, right, and see if I can find any information about this particular model, because I am hoping, I might be wishful thinking, but I'm hoping this might be an international transformer. I might be able to wire this to 240 on the primary side, which would negate the need to pull this out and replace it and rewire it, which is quite a big job. Just look at the rest of the amp. These are EL34s. Okay, they're quite fat. Quite a fat bottle EL34. These are Valvart EL34 Chinese. And in the preamp, these are all 12AX7B Chinese tubes, which, as you probably know, are as rare as rocking horse shit these days. You cannot get these. This is from the factory that burnt down or shut down or whatever happened. I've only got a few left of these myself, so that's a pretty handy score for Mark. I've got a nice set of 12AX7Bs in here. Output transformer looks original. I can just make out Bogner on that sticker there. Obviously the choke, a couple of can caps on the chassis. Let's flick it over and see what's cooking on the inside. Right, here we are on the inside. They're well-made amps. You've got to love these, the way that Bogner go about doing this stuff. I love all this PCB stuff, obviously, guys. If you follow me on the channel, you know this is what I'm all about, right? Designing and building these things. And, Bogner have been doing this for years, right? And doing it beautifully. PCB mounted tube sockets on the preamp, which I think is the way to go, right? All this bullshit about hand wired amps, it's just such nonsense. Secondary board here, I suspect that, I'm just going to take a guess here, right? This is obviously the preamp. These two tubes here, I bet you, yeah, this one here will be the send and return for the effects loop. Here are the send and return jacks here, so this will be a cathode follower setup, almost certainly driving the send, and this is the recovery stage. This will be the phase inverter tube. Dead giveaway here, you can see the fizz cap, phase inverter coupling here. Let's look at the main board. I don't think this has been modded. Right, you can see here how some of this stuff is kind of floating or flying above the PCB. Very kind of diesel-esque, like the VH4. But that all looks factory to me. This amp does not look like it's been modded or touched, which is good news for Mark, I think. PCB mounted pots as well, and it's quite interesting how this is done. When you see PCB mounted pots, you normally see the PCB on the underneath. Right? You can't see it on the video, obviously. I'll take a photo and throw it up there, but the pots are actually underneath these boards, and you can see these terminals here, all these pads, solder pads. These are the pots, right, directly soldered onto the PCB. So extensive use of printed circuit boards in this amp, and that is completely fine with me. More filter caps here, so these will be filter range for the preamp and all for the different stages here. Big filter caps here, which are in addition to the couple of can caps that are on the top of the chassis. This will be a voltage regulator and a heatsink. Another heatsink and regulator here. Well, that's definitely a voltage regulator. That might be a transistor actually. But that makes me think that running DC heaters all the way through this preamp, which is a good idea. Power transformer, right. Now, I am very interested in what's going on here. As I just mentioned when we looked at the top side of the amp, I'm suspecting that this power transformer is not the original one, and it might already be able to do international wiring, or, you know, 240 volts is what I need here in Australia. And you see these unused wines here? Right, now, why would you have unused wines on a power transformer? There's only two reasons. They are additional wines for the primary side that allow you to wire the power transformer for different wall voltages, you know, 100 volts all the way to 240. Or they are unused wines on the secondary side. We fire this up at 120 volts on the wall, and I will take some voltage measurements on the plates, and, you know, make sure that I can, when we get this going at 240 volts, that I can replicate the voltages that the amp has at 120 with this current power transformer. So let's measure the voltages on this guy before we do anything about changing this PT or rewiring it. So I am going to check, I'll just go straight to DC here, and we'll get a reading of the plates, the B plus line. So coming out of standby here, I've got the variac set at 117. So I'm just going to go straight to pin 3 on one of the power tubes here, 504. That's a pretty healthy plate voltage, right? Anything over 500 is pretty up there. So 504, let's call it. Variac is showing 117. Now, these four diodes here, this is the, you know, the bridge rectifier, and you can see these two solder pads here. These will be the high voltage secondary coming off the power transformer. So this is an AC. So this is really, you know, this is what the power transformer is actually supplying the amp. So you always measure with AC. You've got to measure across. You don't measure these to ground unless it's a center tapped secondary that's grounded. Often isn't, right? And so when you measure these high voltage secondaries like this, or your heaters, you don't measure your heater voltage to ground. You've got to measure it across the two pins. All right, so see if I can get a decent reading on here. Let's have a look. All right, come on. There we go. Right, 390. Let's call it 391. Okay, so that sounds about right. 390 secondary bridge rectified would give you 500 volts on the plates. Okay, if we can get those numbers reproduced at 240, we're cooking with gas. Here's something interesting, just while we've got the amp like this and upside down. Check out these lights, right? This is so Bogner-esque. It's just so eccentric and crazy. And it's incredible. Look at the effort that has been put in to supplying a light on the front panel. I mean, that is just insane. It's amazing. It's kind of hilarious, but that's what geniuses do, right? They do crazy shit like this. Incredible. Just a couple more readings here, guys, while I've still got it in at 120. This white pair of wires here, this will be the bias wind, almost certainly, right? It comes over to here where the bias setup is guaranteed to be the bias wind. it comes in here, these two pads. Right, let's have a look. Right, 56 AC, so that's, yeah, definitely, you could rectify that for your negative bias. DC voltage, no worries at all. There is another, there's a grey pair and a brown pair that are coming off that secondary side as well. I'm not sure where they come on the board, so if we end up lifting this out, that's what I'm going to see. But actually here they are here. Grey, brown. There's the greys, there's the brown. Right, simple. These are bridge rectifiers. Right, so that's all in one. So rather than having 4 diodes like that, you can get them in, you can get a package like that where it's all just kind of contained together. So let's measure this. Yeah, right, okay. So I've just had a closer look at the wiring here. The grey pair and the brown pair do come into here, but they are wired straight to these bridge rectifiers with heat shrink. So I can't actually, with the amp running like this, I can't actually get in there and measure it, but I can measure the rectified DC. Kind of work backwards from there, right? So this guy here is 16.5. I'm going to guess that this has been set up for DC heaters, 12 volts. I'll check that. Now this pair here is coming over 6.6 volts. So that'll be a lower voltage supply for the channel switching. Now the amp's not using relays, it's using LDRs, right, which is the original SLI 100s, the same. So that's what those two pairs will be for. So looks like off this PT we've got the bias wind, obviously high voltage secondaries, which are the green ones here. We've got a brown pair which is giving us 6.6 volts DC, and we've got the grey pair which is giving us about 16 volts. That 16 volts DC is probably going into this regulator here to give us a nice steady 12 volt line for the heaters. Now let's see if I can get a reading here. Look at that, 12.65 volts DC. So we've got DC heaters as expected across the preamp. Cool. All right, it's all making sense. So just an update. I think I figured out this PT. I pulled out all these kind of winds and have sussed them out, right? So these, you see these are pairs, right? 2 oranges, 2 white and orange. And they originate from the same place in the PT as the 2 yellows and that kind of red and orange. The red and orange will be a center tap. The 2 yellows, the 2 oranges, and the 2 white and oranges will be 3 different high voltage secondary voltages. So this PT is kind of, you know, universal, I guess, that you could probably use it for a few different setups to, you know, for the N B plus line or the plate voltage that you're looking for. All right, so those are not going to help me. And I've established that in terms of the primary side, this white one was the live, which was switched, and the other one, this blue one, is connected to the primary wind as well. And using the Variac, I've been able to verify that this is 100 volts. All right, so this will be, you know, for Japanese market. This is a 100 volt tap. This is the 120, which was originally on there, and that is it. There is no other primary winds on this PT. So it has to come out, and I'm just crossing the room to get it. This is going to go in. All right, this is the Mercury drop-in replacement. So this job, unfortunately, is going to be a bit harder than I'd perhaps hoped for. But anyway, update on progress, guys. The old PT is out. All right, pretty obvious, I guess, from the markings here that it's 100 volts and 117. Certainly not doing 240. So it's not the easiest thing in the world to get out, but it wasn't, you know, looks not certainly not beyond the realms of possibility. Just lifting this board up, you have to take it out. I took all the nuts off the standoffs, and you're able to get this up high enough to do what you need to do. But using my handy desoldering gun, which is an absolute must-have tool for this kind of work, I was able to remove it. And these bridge, there they go, bridge rectifier, right? The blue and the brown pairs very easily came off, right? So once you use a desoldering gun on those pads, I was able to lift the board off, because you can see with these legs, right, those legs are soldered into the printed circuit board and the rectifier is bolted to the chassis. There's no way that board's coming up until you remove these, and that actually makes it easy to wire in the new power transformer, which is the next part of the job, right? So let's get onto it. All right, guys, well, I try really hard not to swear on this channel, but fuck me. Oh, mate, this fucking thing, I tell you. Right, where do I start? I've wired this thing in, right? So it was not easy. I didn't bother putting time lapse on and all that, because look, I just didn't really know how long this was going to take. But you know, wiring in the PT to the switch, the grounds, all that, easy. This is the bias wind. These DCs, that's all cool. It was a bit of a pain in the ass getting under here, as you could imagine, right? This is where the high voltage secondary comes in. But anyway, look, that's all kind of, you know, by the by, right? That's just what you have to deal with when you take on jobs like this. But anyway, I then bring the amp on, right? And I use my variac, you know, particularly new PT, right? And I'm changing from 120 to 240 volts. You're not just going to whack that with 240 and hope for the best. Well, you could, but I don't. I use my variac. So I'm bringing this amp up, all right? You know, 40 volts, 50 volts, 60 volts. And what I always do when I'm doing something like that, and I've featured this on the channel before, is I'll get to like 50 volts or 60 or something like that, and I'll divide that into 240 and get a ratio, right? And then I'll start measuring plate voltages and the bias and so on the basis that it should be, the values that you're reading should be 1/5 of what you're expecting. So, you know, if I'm expecting 500 volts on the plates, I'm looking for 100 volts. If my mains is 1/5 of 240, right, that kind of thing. So that was all good. Everything was happy, no worries, right? All happy days. Everything was checking out. This, the bias, everything was sweet as. All right, I bring it up. The tubes start to glow because the heaters, you know, you're starting to get enough voltage on the heaters to get glow on the EL34s. And even the preamp tubes, you know, starting to get, these are all DC heaters, obviously, as I've already mentioned, they were starting to get enough supply to start to glow. And then I got to about 180 on the variac, and I just heard this noise, and I know that noise, it's like super fucking current, right? It was just like a transformer humming, and then an almighty bang. And I was like, oh, for fuck's sake, what is that? And it was the fuse. Interestingly, this mains fuse and the high tension fuse here were fine. It was the fuse on the variac, right, which is a 3 amp fuse, 3 amp at 240 volts, right? So It's a fair amount of power. And mate, it was a bang. And then I got my partner Catherine, who's at the other end of the house. Jason, what's that noise? And then the smell. And here's what it is, or what it was. Right, this bloody capacitor. So this thing was wired in between the AC mains and ground. Okay. Right, it was sitting there like that, this capacitor, and it's unmarked. Right, I mean, it's a stupid idea to begin with. It's unmarked. What I suspect is that this thing's probably rated for, because this was a 120 volt amp, right, at mains. Maybe the voltage rating on this was 150 volts. I'm going to guess. So when I brought the voltage up and it got to 180 on the mains, this thing crapped itself and it failed via a short circuit. So if I demonstrate that with the meter here, you'll see that this guy, right, short circuit. So you ever tried to put 240 mains straight to ground? What do you reckon happens? Whatever happens, it's not good. I can still smell. Got that electrical smell. I can still smell it in the room. So I changed the fuse. It blew the fuse on the variac. I changed the fuse in the variac to 500 milliamps, and I brought it up again. It got to 7 volts, and the fuse blew. I was like, "What the hell? What the fuck is going on here?" Right? Then I put a 2 amp fuse in the variac and brought it up. I got to about 15 volts, and that capacitor, that red capacitor, started smoking, and I could see it. I was like, right, okay, I wonder if that's shorted. Sure enough, I clipped it out. Right, so that's been cut out now, and I brought the amp up. Look, I'll demonstrate. Right, let's just do it now. I'll take that light off. I'm going to take the amp. Actually, while I'm doing this, I just want to talk about this. Interesting, this 3-way power switch, right? I use these a lot of my amps. The new Alta amp has a 3-way on here, and I've used it on the Kelly as well. So, off, standby, and on. Interestingly, in the Bogner setup is all that's doing is lifting the ground on the cathodes of the power tube. You see this yellow wire here? I might put this light back on. See this yellow wire? Right, that's the ground on the cathodes of these EL34s. And that yellow wire goes all the way around to here, standby. And that'll be a ground there, a ground reference. Right, so you're switching the ground. So when the amp, and I did notice this when I was taking measurements, when it's in standby, the whole amp is getting DC voltage as if it was on. Right? Because normally when an amp's in standby, you're just running the heater current. You're running the heaters, the tubes are hot, but you're not supplying the amp with the B+. This is not like that. Right? The whole amp is energized and ready to go. And then when you come out of standby, all it's doing is grounding the EL34. So the standby in play is almost like a mute function. Quite interesting. I don't mind that. It's probably not how I would build it, but it's pretty cool. So right, let's get back to what I was going to do. Let's turn this on. Okay, and I'm going to bring the variac. I know you can't see this, right, but you'll see the amp come up. So 90, 100 volts, 120, 150, I'm just winding it up, 180, 200, we're now at, that's right on 240 now. Right, and here's our wonderful lights. First thing I noticed, now I've got this plugged into my cab, the 2x12, which is under the bench here. It's way less hum at idle, way less. Now I don't know whether that's because I was running that 120 volt transformer at 50 hertz. I don't actually know that, but this Mercury PT is pretty quiet, right? That's so much better than it was. Right, well, let's finish this job off, right? I'm just gonna tie some of these off with some cable ties. We're gonna take this into the studio and we will demonstrate some tones. Let's have a listen to what this thing sounds like. So with all that done, right, and we had a good ending to this story. This amp's up and running. I'm not through the variac now. I'm straight into the wall. 240 volts here in Australia, and as you can hear, I'm on the gain channel here, or you know, the lead channel, whatever you want to call it. And man, has this thing got some gain. It's pretty smooth too. And you can see on the video here, right, I'll flick over to the amp. I'm running, this is the channel volume here. It's close to midday. Presence is midday. Treble, middle. The bass is right back. Got the bass down at, like, you know, what is that, 10 AM? Because, you know, I actually find this with all Bogner amps, right? There's too much bottom end in them. I find they get kind of bloated and flubby, and I every time I get a Bogner in here and I play it, I turn the bass down and try and kind of get it sounding a bit more martially, I guess. But man, this one is sounding great with the bass back. The gain is, you know, 11 AM, and it's greasy, right? Yeah, it's a pretty magical amp, this. Mark, I think you've done well, mate. I know you said to me that you've been searching for one of these for a long time. You told me it was rare. You told me it was the best Bogner. And I think you're right. It's certainly the best Bogner I've played. It was a big job replacing this PT, and as you saw in the video, right, it didn't come without its scary moments, but all has ended well. And this thing, it's killer. I really like it. It's my favourite Bogner amp by a long shot. Yeah, cool. I'm gonna have fun with this. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this little video, and I will catch you next time.